Welcome back. So in this video, we're going to be heading into some of the supposed evidence people have come up with in an effort to justify the existence of ghosts. I'm going to be taking a look at 4, maybe 5 of the most predominant ways that evidence for these kind of things is presented. Let's start off with the personal experience. Now, I know there are going to be a lot of people out there claiming they've had a personal experience. Maybe they've seen a ghost, maybe they know someone who claims to have seen a ghost. Either way, the problem with the personal experience is the very nature of the experience itself. It's personal. The term most often used to describe this kind of experience is anecdotal. If you don't know what that means, an anecdote is basically a personal remark or comment made about something without any means of backing it up, aside from the word of the individual who made that claim. My other series that I do on this channel called Creep Stories is basically nothing but a swarming heap of anecdotes. You're pretty much left to take people's word for them. Unfortunately, that's not how science works. We don't just get to take someone's word for things. They need to provide evidence that their word is worth substantiating. The same, sadly, goes for ghost stories. While they are fun to tell and oftentimes keep us up at night, which is why I tell them, when someone claims they saw something but has no way to prove it, they might as well be whistling Dixie out their asshole. That said, if someone were to come to me and claim they saw a ghost, my response would generally be, well, I'm sure you did. Just like I'm sure the schizophrenic next door honestly believes he's hearing the voice of Jesus through his television set. The point is, just because you think you see something does not necessarily mean that what you saw was what you think you saw, or that you actually saw anything at all. Oh, and by the way, I'm not saying that I think people who experience ghosts are mentally ill. I mean, if that were the case, I'd be the king of ice cream land. Unfortunately, in the age of everything on the internet being offensive, some jokes must be clarified. Yes, folks, I have a sense of humor too. Fortunately, most people out there know that while telling their ghost stories is fun, without any backing, they're not going to get very far. Enter the amateur ghost hunter. There are people out there who go around to supposedly haunted locations doing things like taking pictures, recording EVPs, and taking thermal readouts. So let's start with thermal and temperature readouts. There are devices that are designed to register abrupt changes in things like temperature and atmospheric pressure. A lot of people who partake in ghost hunting will use these kinds of tools to track things like cold spots or unusual infrared patterns. This seems like a reasonable approach. After all, if ghosts are made from energy and absorb it from the environment, it should be measurable, right? Well, yeah, but here's the problem. In order to properly conduct an experiment, or rather, collect accurate results, all variables must be accounted for and controlled. When you're working in an environment that's unpredictable, or where not all of the variables can be controlled for, gathering evidence for your hypothesis can be difficult. In the case of temperature change, you have to consider location, time of day, year. Are you inside, outside? Are there windows? Are they open? Is there an air conditioning system? Is the building maintained properly? Are there technological issues? Does the heating system work? Where are the pipes? How is the electricity wired up? All of these things and more come into play when you're trying to determine where that cold spot came from and why. Sure, it seems like a good way to test for strange occurrences, but in reality, the variable rate is just so high that if that's your only source, nobody's going to take you seriously. Luckily, our amateur ghost hunter also comes equipped with a camera. For anyone who's ever browsed the internet, ghost photos are a beloved fandom in their own right. Everyone loves a good ghost photo, whether it's orbs, bizarre streaks of light, or free-floating, full-torso vaporous apparitions. There's no shortage of strange photographs out there. Unfortunately, there's also a thing called Photoshop. Now, I know what people are thinking. Some of these things are obviously Photoshop, but not all of them, right? Well, of course not. Not everybody Photoshops their pictures, although I've browsed through my fair share of ghost photos, and generally you tend to come across 3 different types. The first is the unmistakable ghost, a full-on apparition, usually blurry or out of focus, but it's there, and I've seen quite a lot of these. Sadly, I think a lot of the more extreme photos like this fall into the same shock value category. People make cool stuff to scare other people. The second type of photograph we often see are things like orbs or streaks of light that resemble lens flares. Here's a photograph I took while I was exploring an abandoned mental institution. See the orb? That place was filled with asbestos and probably a lot of other nasty crap. You can tell just by looking at it that there was dust everywhere. Of course, the place my friends and I were investigating was the surgical ward. This was a hallway in a building where they performed lobotomies. For those of you who don't know, a lobotomy is when a doctor takes the equivalent of a pair of ice picks and jams them into your skull, severing or severely damaging the frontal lobe region of the brain. This was used as a method to sedate violent patients. It worked because the frontal lobe is the region of the brain where your personality is pretty much stored. It's basically what makes you you, in very layman's terms. Damage that and you've got yourself a drooling vegetable. Creepy story aside. Orbs are fun to look at, but I would not be calling them ghosts by any means. So that just leaves the last category, the ambiguous photograph. We've all heard of this one. Squint really hard at that tree over there and you'll see a face. The ambiguous photograph is your typical wait-for-it moment where someone takes a picture and by some strange coincidence of angles and lighting, something odd seems to appear if viewed from the right direction. Optics, my friends, illusions. The human brain is partial to patterns. People have a tendency to seek out patterns of familiarity in chaotic backdrops, even when there is actually no pattern to be found. This is why the lines of a wooden door can sometimes smile back at you or bunnies appear in clouds. It's also why people see Jesus in toast, and of course, it's the reason for the absurd amount of alleged ghost photos you can find with a quick Google search. That being said, is there any reason to believe that photographs can be genuine? Sure. Good luck proving it. See, the problem with using photographs as ghost evidence is that they can't be replicated. So if you take a picture and it records an alleged ghost, you are the only one who can verify that you haven't tampered with that photograph. Similar to how if you do an experiment and get a result, you and possibly your team are the only ones who witnessed the experiment. So your results are subjectable until the experiment has been repeated by a separate team and the results of said experiment line up with the previous claim. Ghost photos can rarely ever be reproduced, so no matter how real you may claim that photograph to be, without any way of being able to replicate it, the only thing it's really good for are campfire stories. Same goes for videos. People often come back and say, well, we can test it, we can see if it's been edited. True, but this day and age you can do a lot with computers, and there's some pretty powerful programs out there. Now, what about audio, more specifically EVP? EVP stands for Electronic Voice Phenomenon. This is a phenomenon that can be found when you take a tape recorder or microphone and record the surrounding area after a person presumably asks a question. The idea is that ghosts will respond on a frequency either too high or too low for the human ear to register, and therefore it may be picked up by a device that is capable of registering electronic frequencies on a broader scale. Search for EVPs and you'll most certainly find just as wide a variety. Again, these audio snippets fall into the same trap of ambiguity as the photographs do. Half the time, what you're hearing is static, and because the human brain's tendency toward patterns, people will point out a vaguely interpretable bit of chop and claim it's a word or sentence that you have to strain to hear. Or maybe if you play it backward, it'll proclaim its love for the devil. The vast majority of this is BS. However, you do occasionally get a clear-cut response that is both audible and startling. While sound bites are easily editable, they hold a little more sway than photography, especially considering the tech. The downside is also, well, the tech. Here's the problem with EVP. We live in an age where wireless communication is abundant. Everything is Wi-Fi, the internet, cell phones, video games. All of this information is being transmitted across the world at a rapid pace. Radio wave frequencies, all sorts of stuff. If you're trying to record ghosts with a device designed to pick up frequencies at a broader range than the human ear, how do you know you're not picking up somebody's phone conversation? Hell, you could even be picking up someone's video game microphone. Quick story. At one of the old apartments I lived in, I was sitting around on my PlayStation and out of nowhere, I start getting someone's phone conversation through the speakers of my television. It was choppy, I could only make out a few words, but I guess we were on the same frequency that day. That said, what happens if you're in an area where there are no telephone poles or cell phone signals? Aside from the fact that that's extraordinarily unlikely given the satellite range of some of this stuff, let's play devil's ad. Let's say that you're off in, Europe somewhere at an allegedly haunted location and there's no technology around for miles. There's no way you could possibly get interference, and this has somehow been verified. Okay, so you have your trusty EVP machine, aka a tape recorder, and you start asking your questions. Lo and behold, a voice responds. Holy shit, you've just gotten proof of a ghost. Not only that, but an intelligent ghost. After all, it's responding to your question, right? I guess that's the end of the argument. Irrefutable evidence of intelligent hauntings. Not quite. For anyone who thinks this is irrefutable, I have a challenge for you. I want you to go find yourself your favorite movie. Now, this works better with a VHS, but you can actually do it with a DVD too. Hell, you can do it with a Laserdisc. All you have to do is pop your movie in, fast forward it for about half a minute, then press pause and go grab your tape recorder or your iPhone if you can do that. For those of you with a DVD, pop your disc in, go to the chapter selection, pick a chapter somewhere halfway into the movie, then pause and pull out your recording device. Now, ask a question. Some of the typical EVP-based questions people like to pose are, what is your name, where are you from, why are you here? Ask one of these or something else that's fairly simple and push play. Then record the first response you get. Now, repeat this process 7, maybe 8 times at different intervals within the movie. Play back your recording and see how many times your question was seemingly answered by the ghost in your television set. If you stand there long enough, you're gonna get a response that seems to line up with what you're asked. Does that mean that you're being contacted by some magical force? No. What it means is that you are catching what is essentially a pre-recorded moment caught in a loop that plays indefinitely. The point I'm trying to make is that intelligent hauntings may not exist. What you are arguably picking up could very well be a loop of inaudible sound replaying over and over again, creating the illusion that whatever made it is sentient and responding to you. Again, sort of like the recurring haunt. Of course, this also presumes you're not just picking up on someone's cell phone conversation, but the premise still holds. You can't be sure you're not tuning into something at a coincidental time, resulting in what is perceived to be a conscious response. The last point I'd like to make about this is television shows. As I've said before, Hollywood is your cash grab and ghosts are gold. You don't know what goes on in that editing room, so trying to claim that television is proof is frankly laughable. Still, I don't think it's fair to conclude that all ghost stories and ghost evidence are fake. What I will say is that they are most definitely confined to the experiences of the individuals that have them. So that's all I've got for you guys on this, at least for the time being. The next topic I'm going to cover will be a more in-depth look at some of the ideas behind inhuman spirits, specifically what they are, where they come from, and whether or not there's reason to believe they might be real.